Sounds good.
There we are. We are live. Good evening, everybody. We are YouTube heavy at the moment just now with all the comments coming in so far. I think it's because YouTubers can comment before the event starts. I don't think they're any quicker than our Facebookers. Good evening to everyone. We've got Rick, we've got Dave, Ian Bruce, some of the regular motley crew online there. Guys, let us know what you're drinking, what's in your glass. Ian is saying, yeah, enjoying Aberdeen's sunshine for once. It's been pretty good all week, I think. Yeah, it's been pretty
nice
good.
out there tonight. It looks bonny.
Yeah, managing supper and a drink out the backy.
Nice. Have you got it? Have you got a situteri? There's nothing better than a situteri.
Let's see if he has. And what is he drinking? And what are you eating, actually? Let's do a bit of... is it Radio Scotland? Do they Get It On show? And everyone phones in and requests and tells them what they're eating for their supper. We don't really do that. It's a bit late for supper, is it? Although I've just had mine. How are you, Kat? Sorry, I'm
good. Yeah, just enjoying the sunshine. Been over at the other work today. Busy old day with the touristos, so it's full bung tourist season. So busy, but it's good.
Awesome. We had a guy come into the shop today. Last thing, phoned up. He got over to you guys at 5 o'clock, and you were closed. So he phoned us and he came over. He bought one of your fine whiskies from us. So yay to us.
Yay to you, but yay! Do you know it's a win for Glengarry? You know, so.
Everyone's a winner.
Everyone is a winner. Yeah.
As far as that again.
I mean, we probably shouldn't mention it, but it will be mentioned at some point, I'm sure.
Yeah. Let's get it out in the open straight away. What are you sampling tonight? Have you got a wee dram in your glass?
So Dougal very kindly sent over some samples to us, and I have got the Big Pete Smokehouse in a red wine. I think finished in a red wine cask, and I think it's maybe Dougal, correct me, but I think it was their Fashila release. It's like literally my favorite thing. Just now, I'm going to buy a bottle of it as soon as we're finished with this. I love it so much. So that's what's in my glass. I really do. I really, really like it. It's fantastic.
I've got the other sample, the Scallywag chocolate. In my glass. We're going to start off with that, and I'm actually going to use tonight as an excuse to crack open this one as well. A Glenrothes 7-year-old, which I won in a raffle about 2 years. It was during lockdown anyway, and I remember having it, so I thought I'm going to crack that open tonight as well and get into that. I think it's a full bourbon cask. All of us sherry punch. Something a wee bit different for me as well. I enjoy Dominic has playing a risky game of drinking whiskey and using super glue.
Okay.
I really want to know what you're doing, Dominic. So let us know and let us know how you get on with that.
I want to know if that's just a drinking game or if he's actually it's DIY. He's up in the stakes with drinking games.
yeah. So he's got 6 samples of whiskey and one of them is super glue, and he has
actually
to,
Dominic, if you're building me whiskey shelves, then fantastic. Put that glass down and get on with it.
Yeah, maybe that's exactly what he's doing.
I hope so.
Good evening, Rick. Watching also from our Whisky Academy page, and Bob on Facebook as well. Bob has just poured a Thompson Brothers 1998 Orkney 20-year-old. Wow, good stuff. Bringing out the good stuff. Talking of the good stuff, let's bring our guest on. Let's get Dougal on. He's sitting there patiently in the background.
Where's he going? He's back.
Hey guys, good evening.
Panic! I thought, oh my god, someone's gone wrong.
Well, last week we sent the email to the wrong address, so this week we just lose Dougal completely.
No, that's fine. No, we're here. We're here. It's fine. We're all as well.
I know there's probably some guy called Ben Ingalls, somewhere in the world, got this email and he's like,
patiently waiting to join in on a chat. Poor guy.
How else can you get new fans worldwide? Random people just send random emails. It works.
That's true.
Invite them to a chat. We should totally do that. Just invite random people on.
Spam everyone. All the John Smiths in the world. We should just email at once. There's surely loads.
Sorry, Dominic's repairing his glasses, and Ian's asking if it's his Glencairns. I'm assuming spectacles rather than Glencairns. I'm not sure the flavour would go down well.
Yes, if glue notes come through the tasting notes later on for every whiskey, it's consistent. I like it.
So, Dougal, what's in your glass? Looks pretty funky.
Well, yeah, so I've got two. Of course, I'd have to double up. So I have actually one of our other new additions that we have from Douglas Laing. So I've actually got our Galdrons Sherry Batch number 2. So it's our Campbelltown blended malt in one glass, and then the other I have got, as I was talking to yourselves about, this cocktail I've only recently discovered randomly, but it's been around for a while, called a Paper Plane. And so it's essentially equal parts whiskey, Aperol, Amaro, which is an Italian herbal liqueur, and then some lemon juice. But it is dangerous stuff, but nice sunny day in Glasgow, and yeah, what better time to do it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Looks good.
I think you guys were about 10 degrees higher than us just now. You're about 24, 25, aren't you?
No, I don't know if we've reached those heights, those lofty heights of Scottish peak summer, but I think we're kind of around the 20 mark. So perfect time for the whiskey cocktails to come through. So
absolutely.
Slightly disappointed you're not on the Ochie and Ale though, Dougal.
That's dangerous stuff as well. It's the Ochie and Ale is a classic. I think
it is. It's such a classic, and it's so easy as well. So that's probably a good introduction into how we know each other. So Dougal and I know each other from working for the same company. Dougal was in Auchentoshan for a number of years, and you're now, you class as brand ambassador for Douglas Laing?
Yeah, I guess so. I started as kind of European, now kind of covering a little more global stuff. So I'm floating around there. So I guess for us, I cover Europe first, UK second, and then North America seems to be the next developing part. Whereas we have a brand ambassador based out in Asia, John, and then we actually have a very, very specific one, Valentine, based in Netherlands. So he is our Dutch brand ambassador, if you like. So there's just the three of us that are really the BA title with our old Douglas Laing. So yeah, I kind of cover a little bit of everything, which is quite nice.
Okay, awesome. And how long have you been with Douglas Laing now? Is it Douglas Laing, Douglas Laing?
Douglas Laing. So depending what part of the border you're from, so you're south of the border, it tends to be Douglas would be Laing, but we're in Scotland, so it's Douglas Laing. So I'm sorry, I'd be this trip just coming up 18 months or so since I joined Douglas Laing. So yeah, an initial kind of 6 months of really just bedding in with, as most people know us, we've got a lot of brands. So I've gone from kind of knowing one or two brands inside out to really having to know a little bit about everything, which is a great challenge, but keeps you on your toes for sure. I think it's definitely a nice challenge for, trying to know elements of every element of whiskey, every new distillery, every single cask. There's a lot going on.
Sorry, Karen, Mike.
No, you crack on.
I was going to say there'd be elements of your old role and your new role that are very similar, as in talking about a brand to people that are coming to listen. But as you say, there's so many brands, like so many different expressions that you have. So do you talk about every single one? Do you concentrate on one or two at a time when you're touring or traveling?
You're right. So certainly I couldn't have asked for a better introduction to whiskey than working with Beam Suntory and Auchentoshan previously. Kind of coming in as a tour guide, my actual background was Scottish history. That was what my degree was in. So I came in purely on this is really interesting from a heritage, history, story element. And I'd already been a tour guide on the history side. So therefore linking the whiskey bit was the second bit that followed, like the actual tasting and nosing and developing the palate really was the second part of it. So I'd already had that public speaking tour guide role just without the whiskey element. So getting into Beam Suntory with Auchentoshan, I think I timed it really well. Auchentoshan had just kind of gone through another revamp. It was very going towards this more young, vibrant Auchentoshan we kind of see today with the kind of big Glasgow expressions and really seeing it was kind of the real cocktail younger options for
the kind of got that urban kind of look as well, isn't it?
And certainly within the Beam portfolio, it's probably the least traditional. I think if we're potentially someone like a Glengarry is maybe one of the more traditional elements, which is again has changed over the years. But certainly I came into Ochie at the right time, and then now with Douglas Laing, I kind of cover everything. So whether that is stuff like Big Peat and the blended malts, or single cask single malts, or blends, and we've just got our own single malt about to be released this year as well. So really full range, full spectrum of the world of whiskey, which is quite fun. But yeah, certainly it's a lot of different things.
Awesome. And what was, you just said about the single malt, you got that release. Can you tell us a little bit about the single malt that's coming up?
Yeah, so most people know that Douglas Laing in 2019, we purchased Strathearn, which just outside of Perth, kind of lower Highlands. And with Strathearn, when we took it over, it had already been going since 2013. So it was already about 6 years old. But at the time, it was essentially the smallest distillery in Scotland. And I say that when people think, oh, Edgeworth, it's like, no, now at 500,000 litres. Strathearn, when we took over, was 30,000 litres. It is tiny, like super small. Since that point, since 2019, we've kind of doubled the production, but we haven't released a single drop of it. So the only stuff that's ever on the market was a release that was prior to Douglas Laing's involvement. So we really kind of sat on it. And now this year, we're essentially approaching 10-year-old spirit with a lot of the liquid there, mixing in with some of our younger stuff we've been filling since we kind of came in. But certainly with Strathearn, it is really focused on that craft element. You're talking 3 distillers, that's it. Angela cannot praise her enough in terms of what she's doing and the experimentation going on. Now one of the lecturers with Institute of Brewing and Distilling. She won Distiller of the Year last year. Like, we cannot be happier than having Angela at the helm. But it's 3 of them. Until maybe 6 months ago, they were hand lifting bags of malt and dropping them into the mash tun. Like, it was that scale of hands-on craft whiskey. So super cool, really interesting. And the whiskey coming out is going to be phenomenal. It's really interesting whiskey.
I remember the pre-Douglas Laing whiskey came out, it was done in an auction, wasn't it? The first cask, single cask, and bottle number 1 went for something ridiculous.
Yeah, so it had a really good reputation already in terms of what they were doing, but they made a very clear choice that the majority of the casks, like 90% of them, were filling into firkins, octaves, super small. So by the time we kind of came in, that stuff is pretty wooded. It's pretty dark, pretty fruity, pretty chewy. So since we kind of came in, we're really kind of what we bring to the table with Douglas Laing's kind of background is bring your own casks in, really kind of emphasizing our relationships, our own experience, the cask we want to fill, and the kind of future Strathearn is going to be a combination of some of these old super concentrated casks to begin with, but maybe your more classic distillery styles, if you like. So yeah, more classic, kind of a lot more bourbon barrels, a lot more wine barriques, a lot more sherry butts. So a little bit more traditional in that sense.
So is there going to be a core range to that, or is this just a sort of like?
So initially, it's still going to be a pretty small batch, unsurprisingly. We're producing about 1 barrel's worth a day, I believe, is the current count. It's about 200 litres a day, if you do the maths. Could get a little bit more, but that's kind of Monday to Friday for the guys. So initially, certainly going to be pretty small batch stuff, but that's, as far as we see it, the charm of Strathearn. It's not going to be for the mainstream consumer. It's going to be for the whiskey geeks. It's going to be for the people that want whiskey. It's going to do everything you expect for Douglas Laing whiskey. It's going to be high alcohol. It's going to be non-chill filtered. It's going to be natural color. Kind of hopefully doing everything right, but very much in that small batch premium category. I think more something like a Loch Lee style, if you like, in terms of where the pricing is and what kind of value the whiskey is. But the first release is obviously a combination of the last 10 years of whiskey. So we've actually got up to 10-year-old stock. It's not like we're coming out with a 3-year-old the day it turns 3. We actually have fully aged stock up, which is quite fun.
Cool. And Strathearn is it Perthshire or is it Fife?
It's in Perthshire. So kind of you head out towards Methven, so kind of just west of Perth. Just before you get that large roundabout. Very much lower Highland, and we're certainly trying to make this very big, robust, kind of creamy, juicy spirit. So should be really interesting. And like I say, so for the whiskey geeks, essentially, it's the stuff like at the moment we're like plus 140 hours of fermentation. Like so we're producing some really interesting stuff. We're using Maris Otter barley, which is essentially a brewer's barley that no one else uses. So really not looking at the alcohol yield at all. It's really on flavour and what brings it differently.
So it's sort of traditional brewer's yeast and long fermentations and landrace type barley. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so trying to go back the way, if you like, more like a 200-year-old single malt rather than the stuff that a lot of people produce today. So
I think we're seeing more and more people looking for that as well. So it's probably a good shout. Be interesting to see.
Talking of the whiskey geeks, Rick is asking on Facebook a tour guide question, and so both Kat and Douglas, Dougal, sorry, you're confusing this, Dougal, because you got Douglas Laing, Dougal.
Oh yeah, sorry, I can change that.
It's Dougal, Rick. So because I'm going to start calling you Douglas now as well.
I get it a lot because lots of people ask me, "Are you a family member?" So,
do you think that aspect is in the tour guide aspect of the industry? It's tougher now to do. Basically, there's more whiskey geeks out there. There's more people, I suppose, not only know more but have access to knowledge straight away on the phone as well. Are they asking more detailed, specific questions, not just when do we get the taste?
See, I wouldn't put Kat in the spot because Kat's still working with it in terms of years, whereas I've now escaped the tour guide world, so I can maybe be a bit more honest. No, I think generally, certainly the education level's higher than it's ever been. I think the information out there is readily accessible and people are keen to educate themselves on it. So you definitely get a lot more, niche questions. But at the same time, for a lot of people, and what strain of yeast you're using, it's not going to make a huge difference really. For me, I far more would rather talk about what the final product's tasting like, what temperature it goes in at, what temperature it comes out at. That kind of level is like, yeah, we can answer it, but what are you gaining from that answer a little bit sometimes? So that's my only gripe with it, if you like, was sometimes just guess you're just, what are you gaining from this information being out there? Whereas I think the really exciting stuff is getting to try it. Yes, we can look at where the flavor comes from and how that's affected it. But yeah, sometimes we do get a bit bogged down with numbers, and you can spend your entire tour just repeating lots of different numbers at people and different temperatures at people, and kind of lose a bit of the charm. Is my only issue with it. But certainly a more educated audience for sure.
Yeah, people like to stockpile information, and sometimes it's just because they feel like that's information they've got to have, but they don't necessarily know how that fits into the end product. Yeah. But as you said, there's definitely a greater level of education. So from my perspective, because I'm talking about something that's we've gone through refurbishment, so there are certain things that I have to get across, which is good when people ask more questions about it because it gives me more scope to talk. But at the same time, it depends on your audience. I mean, Dougal will know just from doing sort of whiskey events, festivals, fairs, people are pretty much just there to drink. They don't care about long fermentations. They just want to know where's the whiskey. So I think it's a variety.
I think for a lot of people it is, we sometimes lose sight of the fact, does it taste good? Are you enjoying drinking it? That's the base level that we're really looking for, I think. I think that's where we should be sitting at the very basic starting point for drinking whiskey is, are you enjoying what you're drinking? Then if you want to continue getting bogged down, but sometimes beforehand is a bit long.
I guess as
sorry, go on.
As in an ambassador role, speaking to people who are drinking the whiskey, they ask questions. You have to have that bank of knowledge there confidently to be able to say, this is the answer to that question, or admit that you don't know it, because gone are the days, I suppose, of kind of a little bit of bullshit and kind of talking your way around a question, because they can just look on their phone and say, well, actually, I've got it on my phone here and this is the fact.
Yeah, I think I really joining Douglas Laing is quite refreshing because Fred's adamant we don't. One, you can never know everything, and I think sometimes there's sometimes still a hint of, and it's dying out a little bit and has died out in the last 5-6 years even, of this kind of one-upmanship of people trying to catch you out. If no, you're wrong. It's actually this year or this date. It's like, I'm not here to be an individual expert about every distillery in Scotland. You can go to the individual places for that. What I'm trying to bring across is a general idea of what we bring to the table with Douglas Laing's case, but also, know elements of each. So knowing if I'm doing a single cask tasting, I'll have sampled each individual sample that we're looking through. I'll know elements of each distillery that's going in, but generally I'd look at classic spirit style versus what we're producing or what we've bottled. What's different about it? It's quite refreshing in terms of we're not there to make a bottle that tastes the same as X, Y, and Z. We're there to make Douglas Laing's Talisker or Douglas Laing's Glengarry. Like, we're trying to put stuff in different casks to get something a bit different. Keep the distillery DNA, do a distillery justice, but with our own equivalent of it. So I think it's quite nice to have that. People still want to challenge it, but certainly with my job now, it's less about being an in-depth expert about every element. It's more about the conversation it can bring around what we do versus doing a distillery tour where people want to know every single individual detail about one distillery.
Excellent. We've got
Do you
Callum.
find that I was going to say, do you find that you're all still trying to break down like people's misconceptions about blends and things as well, though, as part of what you do education about, it doesn't always
hugely. It was actually what brought me into Douglas Laing initially. So I went, obviously, wasn't the only company that I spoke to. And certainly the big appeal for Douglas Laing is I like the education side. And I probably now do more sit-down whiskey geek tastings than I ever did working with Beam Suntory, because Douglas Laing is going to appeal to the geeks. It's single casks, it's Indy bottlings, it's blending stuff that people don't expect us to blend. But that is still no longer not a dirty word. I think people are realizing the real true value of stuff like the blended malts and blends. But certainly the education side is what appealed to me in the first place. Was I get to sit down with a group of people who might have never tried a blended malt. I not only get to let them taste amazing whiskies, but explain to them what we're doing and hopefully the expertise and what we bring to the table with it. So definitely keeps it varied again.
I should say maybe Bob joined on late, but we've mentioned Glengarry a couple of times, so you're due a couple of drams there, Bob, I'm afraid.
We did tell Dougal about the Glengarry.
No. So it's become a bit of a standing joke that Glengarry is mentioned every week. People assumed that I was mentioning it, but if we go back and check the chats, it's usually mentioned by the guests. So
it's also doubly dangerous when we both worked for the same company. I think it's quite inevitable that GG was going to come up. So.
But people have started taking a dram every time we mention Glengarry. So cheers, guys.
Cheers. I can always happily join in with these things. So.
Yeah, Callum Renton's watching on Facebook, and he's just popped up. And this doesn't surprise me at all that he has visited Strathern. Lucky enough to visit Strathern last year and had an impromptu tour. Amazing and tiny.
Yeah, when we say tiny, it is one room and some of the most amazing stills, and yeah, it's very, very cool.
So is the whiskey in a separate area? Are they still doing gin?
So we tend to essentially cut pretty much all that back. We still do kind of third-party stuff, so occasionally, we still do a little bit of it, but it's really all about the whiskey at the moment. So that's kind of what our main focus is.
Right. Okay, so is it a separate? So the whiskey distillery is in one part now, and that's
essentially the gin stills are kind of tucked behind, if you like. So they are still there; they're still in place, but really, it's not part of what we tend to do. We used to do small batch rum as well, and occasionally we still do. And likewise with gin, we actually produced our own gin called Teasmith Gin, which is actually a Ceylon tea based gin. Very interesting. But less of that. Really, the production was getting Strathern up and running, fully focused on whiskey production.
Okay. Because Teasmith is from our neck of the woods. Nick and Emma, Smalley, the owners. They're not far from us in Udney, so just outside of Meldrum actually. Yeah. It's where they're from originally. So yeah, we know all about the Teasmith gin. Yeah, very, very cool. And just that's kind of stuff we kind of still do on a small scale, but beyond that, nothing major, and it's certainly not on the planning schedule really. So
will you be able to visit the distillery, or is it just if people are lucky enough to drop and pass when somebody's there and willing to show you around?
Pretty much. So the distillery tour involves standing at the door and looking in, and you can see the full distillery. So it's not a huge site or anything like that, but it is not open to the public in general. It just happens to be if you catch one of the guys in a good mood or at a time when they're not busy. I wouldn't guarantee anyone any kind of visitor photography. So.
Knowing Callum, when he says lucky enough, he's probably been camped outside the front door for 3 days waiting for somebody to invite him in to try it.
that approach often works as well. So.
That's the nice thing about distilleries, though. Like, everybody's just so nice. So, like, if you do turn up and you just show an interest, quite often folk will just let you look around, or at least look in through the door or somewhere. It's a nice world to be part of.
Yes, very much. Very friendly industry in general. And I think people generally appreciate if they're like, sorry, we're really busy. You can absolutely fine if you're chancing your arm, but generally if you're like, look, yeah, I've got 5 minutes. Do you want to come look at the stills? Do you want to come have a quick look in? It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like the Strathairon's amazing because there's certain things about it that you just don't expect for a distillery, like no sample safe, like which is pretty cool.
Okay.
So like spirit running through and a lot of kind of just like finger tasting for cuts. So each cut is generally assessed by taste, which is pretty cool.
I think, is that not what they're doing for Dornick as well? Is it not all quite kind of just you and sort of testing it, doing things?
SWA are okay with it, but if we get bigger, that's when you start to have conversations. But I think when you're kind of flying under the radar a little bit, then it's okay.
Yeah. I'm sure it'd be SWA or more HMRC that are, when you start to get bigger, produce a bit more.
A bit both.
Knocking on the door.
That's cool.
Yeah. So out with, I mean, we can't say any Beam Suntory because we know of your past there, but what kind of whiskies do you tend to pick up? What do you go for yourself?
I've always kind of sworn by being varied. So if I finish a bottle of something, try and get the opposite. I'm trying to think of like certain distilleries that I would always... I've been spoiled since joining Douglas Laing because as soon as you're working for an Indy bottler means you have access to pretty much every distillery on the planet. So I think maybe I've gotten more towards either interesting casks, a lot more world whiskey than I ever had. So kind of because I'm out and about quite a lot, so I try and pick up some interesting stuff. So some interesting Japanese, like a lot of French, a lot of Germans, some Swiss, like trying to kind of see what everyone else is producing. And because I've found that I've got a bit of an advantage now of being out at whiskey shows in X country, that I can get a chance to try some really interesting stuff, which is cool. Scottish wise, there's certain staples I've always kind of got a soft spot for. Glen Scotia is one of them. I love it's one of these whiskies that I always come back to, and it's like that's a taste for me. So
yeah, you'll have a friend in Callum who's watching. He's a big Glen Scotia fan, as am I. I think I do have a Glen Scotia too sitting here. No, it's empty.
That's a terrible sign. That's a terrible sign, Mike. You should you should never have it empty.
Are you sure Russell didn't have access to that room before he left? Because empty Glen Scotia, that's delicious.
Oh, have I finished it? I have. I finished it. Oh no!
Shocking.
Oh well. So I don't have any Glen Scotia in the house now. But yeah, beautiful, brilliant, kind of in the shadow of the better known, I suppose, Springbank, but for me, producing a far better whiskey.
Yeah, I mean, I like kind of interesting. I think because I find that working in whiskey, you tend to become a bit more picky. I think you end up, because you get to try lots of different whiskies all the time, so maybe a bit more discerning. So you're kind of, what's interesting? What's the story? What's something challenging about it? Even if it's not your taste, just trying something completely different and trying something unique is always interesting.
It kind of relates to Ian's question. It was further up. He was asking what distillery intrigues Dougal the most from his historic focus in mind. So in terms of your sort of history in Scottish history.
Interesting. Again, it probably explains why I kind of got drawn to Campbelltown in terms of like Campbelltown's like storied history, and it's more 100 years removed from it being a capital to now being 3. I appreciate 3 is not going to be 3 for very long, but that kind of idea of having these, I like the general story of whiskey, this kind of almost like we're known as a very dour nation and pretty pessimistic, and then for some reason in the world of whiskey we're suddenly like, oh my god, everything's going great, let's keep on piling in all these distilleries, and you have these golden eras and then it disappears. And then these kind of ebbs and flows of whiskey and these silent distilleries that disappeared, you never hear of. Again, for me, it's if something's got a good story in general, like whiskey does, I think it's already appealing. Individual distilleries, get sucked into. I'll always have a soft spot for Auchentoshan. Let's be honest, it's going to always be in there. Triple distilled when no one else was. It was always a bit weird. Yeah, I like that, and I like Rosebank for the similar idea of this kind of. Two, not rivals, but not far away from each other, distilleries doing something different to the rest of the country. That kind of thing is always intriguing, of why someone decided to do something different. And nowadays, I think it's not even the history point of view, it's more what is interesting, what's different is this kind of going back to craft small batch distilling is becoming really, really desirable and popular again. And people are realizing that, yes, you can have this amazing distillery producing 15 million litres a year and everywhere in the world, but you can also have this tiny little one next door producing something of equal value, quality, whatever you want to put it in, but in more of an old school kind of way. So I like that kind of find that history is kind of repeating itself now with whiskey. They were all chasing after these small batch, unique distilleries again.
Auchentoshan's coming up for its 200-year anniversary soon, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, this year.
Yeah, you'll have to pop back over for it.
Yeah, if we get an invite, I think I've still got enough. I think I'll be allowed back. Should be okay.
Just come up, Neil. I'm sure he'll let you over.
Yeah, I like to think I've got enough connection still there that I'd be allowed back in.
I think you're fine. I think you're good.
Just a young pup compared to Glengarry, though, surely.
Well, I know.
200
Yeah,
years.
cheers, guys. Well done, Mike. I mean, yeah, we're not wanting to brag, but one of the oldest there, guys.
I always remember these stories of you might have documentation proving it's the oldest. I've heard myself floating around.
Yeah.
We'll move on from the willy wagon, and
yeah.
So
we're definitely not the oldest, but definitely one of the oldest.
I did just get an email actually, which I'm quite excited about. A Timorous Beastie port finish, just as I was leaving the shop today.
Oh, very excited for this too. Yeah, it's
well, I'm just just actually reading the email in big red letters. Embargo. So let's not talk about that.
Yep. No mention of that, but yes, very, very excited and looks amazing. I think it kind of shows with. Kat mentioned I'd sent up the Big Pete as the festival edition. You were right, Kat, in terms of this is our face shield bottle for this year, but Big Pete and red wine casks for the first time, and I think it really shows that. So we've been making Big Pete for 14 years and. Super consistent, now is so highly regarded in terms of what we do with it, but it's not like we're resting all laurels, and the same across the whole business. This kind of younger approach, and we are really looking at what interesting casks can we get our hands on. So like Big Pete previously did a Big Pete cognac cask in the past, and some sherry, but red wine was pretty new, and we've got some other things in the pipeline, and across the regional malts, across some of the single casks, maybe a bit more traditional, but with the regional malts, it really allows us to kind of really play around with cask influence and cask finishes and kind of wood influence, and we can go in lots of different directions, and we're not afraid to either. So we're certainly got plenty of experiments that we're working on in the background at the moment. So lots of fun things to come with the regional malts next year or two.
I was reading David Stirk's book, and he was saying that, when you launched Big Pete, I think it was in the 1970s, you were kind of like sort of ahead of the curve, if you like, with it, just like a sort of big blended Islay malt, and kind of it was a slow burner, but now it's got this massive cult following. What is it about it? Do you think it's just the quality, the whiskey that's in there? Is it maybe the branding a little bit?
I mean, I appreciate I was not working in whiskey in 2009, but everything and everyone I speak to about it was pretty controversial. We put a ridiculous kind of cartoon fisherman on the bottle at a time when whiskey was still pretty traditional. There wasn't really much blended malt in the market. If you'd want to, I wouldn't even consider a rival. It's in a different world. But something like a Monkey Shoulder was probably the best known. Blended malt had just shifted in as the term. Like we just moved away from being a bit confused with vatted malts and pure malt and everything. Yeah. So we kind of literally just hit that point in 2009 with that change. And so Big Pete coming into the market, there was an element of utilising a surplus of stock, and we generally were sitting on a lot of Islay stock, so there was an opportunity there to create a new product that would be another channel into the market, which is always interesting. And certainly Fred was very commercially minded, of course, so therefore what's another way we can introduce our whiskies to the market? But I think, one, it's the whiskies in it. We name everything, which is pretty cool. And like you don't often get that. And it's not exactly small names of whiskey. To look at Ardbeg, Bowmore, Kalila, and Port Ellen on the bottle, and you still see that on every single bottle today, 14 years later. It shows you, one, that we managed our stocks very, very well. But I think, the overall quality of the liquid is phenomenal. I think the only, not a challenge, but sometimes people expect more peat because of a name Big Pete. Big Pete is the character, if you like. It's actually really designed to be this epitome of Islay, this classic example of Islay as a whole. It's not designed to be challenging with Freud for medicinal style. It's not designed to be an Octomore. It's not designed to be super dry and ashy as like an Ardbeg. It's designed to be this wonderful balance. It's really for that. This is Islay in its most approachable form, and I think Fred nailed it literally from day one. And the recipe's changed over the years. Like all the regional malts are adaptable, but the overall kind of DNA style of Big Pete, it really is kind of set in stone in terms of this is a style of, as far as we see it, the approachable nature of Islay thing. Introduce you to every element.
It's got a great West Coast vibe about it. It just reminds me of living on the West Coast. I love it. Yeah. Really, really good.
Coastal, salty, sweet, smoky, ashy. Yeah, it kind of ticks a lot of boxes. And because of the blended malt side, it's even today, like you're talking, our festival bottling was a quarter of the price, a third of the price compared to all other festival bottlings. So you get amazing whiskey for what you're getting. Yeah. People are starting to wake up to it now in the same way that people are waking up to kind of single grain whiskey. Like people are realizing there's phenomenal grain whiskey out there. And the prices are not always going to be like this, but at this moment in time, still kind of on this cusp of blended malt becoming recognized for what it actually is. Yeah, I think there's a strong chance that you're still getting very good whiskey for your money, but it's going to creep up as we go.
We're seeing a lot of independent bottlers, especially going down a blended malt market or a blend market. You know, you've got your Adelphis.
Yep.
Lady of the Glen have come out with theirs. Dramore with the Dumbarton Rock, and Berry Brothers have got their range. I think there's certainly, I mean, maybe a kind of pushback against price increases. People can actually say, well, here's a good blended malt for a good price for drinking whiskey. With the single malts tend to go up a lot more. I think it's becoming more acceptable. Maybe that's the wrong word to use, but people are now buying into blended malts as a drinking whiskey, and the consistency there is there as well. So.
I think something like Big Pete, one, I think it shows that we've been doing it for 14 years. I think, like I say, every single cask and every single batch is signed off by Fred and Cara. So every single drop goes to the family. And we have a recipe, but it's still of a small batch nature. So you'll still have Big Pete constructed, everything signed off in terms of quality-wise. It's still the same distilleries going into it. It's phenomenal liquid going in. So what a surprise, the product at the end with Fred's initial kind of blending experience, like 50 odd years in blending. He knows what he's doing when it comes to putting together a really, really good blend. And now people are realizing it's the potential to be the greater than the sum of its parts situation. You can really elevate a whiskey by adding different layers in. You can add another dimension to it. And certainly that's where blended malt comes in. We are not restricted to one set distillery style. We can play around and balance and do things that a single malt can't. So it's just about recognizing it's not necessarily a lesser product. It's just a different product.
Yeah,
it was quite bold putting a sort of gimmicky cartoon almost character on it when you've got such big pronounced, prestigious names in there. But it's fun. I mean, Dominic's mentioned it up there as well, that he really enjoys the sort of playful side of the branding and things. Is that just a consistent part of who Douglas Laing is?
Yes and no. I think one, I get highlights with Cara coming into the business in terms of kind of second to third generation. I think Fred would be quite happy with me saying that he's maybe a bit more traditional in terms of what casks we're utilizing and what we're doing with the styling, if you like. And you see it with our Old Particular range, the Provenance range. The Provenance hasn't dramatically changed. Old Particular is technically our oldest brand, if you like. So in terms of what we're still producing today, so it's kind of a year 2000 or so. Thank you, Mike. Good demonstration. So yeah, so we've been making Old Particular as our single cask line since 2000. So it's been around for a long time, but it's still relatively almost near enough identical to what it was 20 odd years ago. Whereas, Big Pete and then the regional malts that spawned from Big Pete, there was this opportunity to do something a bit different. And I think they kind of jumped on it and realized one of the things Douglas Laing's best known for, one, is the branding and the marketing side, especially with the regional malts and the liquid that goes inside them. But this ability to do custom labels, all the different editions of Big Pete, all the city editions, country editions. There's about over 400 different Big Petes on the go at the moment, all floating around. So it's this really fun, customizable element that makes you can get personal bottlings of it. Essentially, anyone could approach us and say, can I do my own Big Pete? And therefore, it's something really fun. And certainly within Scotland, we've done quite a few. Like we've done at least 2 batches of like with Robin down at Robbie's Drams in Ayr. Like we've done a few different Robbie's Drams Big Pete, which is really, really cool to have that super small batch customizable element to a bottle of whiskey is very fun.
You did was it Scallywag with the Highlander?
Yep.
As well, the Highlander, and you did.
Yeah, we did up your direction, kind of. We did Big Pete with Tindrum. We kind of we've done a few all over. We did then the Glasgow edition.
Every whiskey shop one.
Yep.
Like, get them every whiskey shop one.
See if we can challenge some people. It's always touting for business. Clearly, that's why I'm here. But,
absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, I guess that kind of element certainly. I think it shows that we don't take ourselves too. We do take ourselves seriously, but I think whiskey doesn't have to be this inaccessible.
It's more the idea of the spirits does the talking. The branding is just,
Yeah, I think it certainly pulls people in. Like people go, that's a really cute little mouse in the bottle, and then they realise the whiskey in there is phenomenal as well. Yeah.
Wee fox terriers with his wee scarf on at winter time. That's the cutest wee thing ever.
Yeah, people like dogs. That's a pretty straight summary of it.
And good people like dogs. There's people out there that don't like dogs, but we don't need to spend time with them.
Yeah, I've not been interrupted, but my dog Judah is floating around somewhere. So, and not whiskey related, island related rather than whiskey related. At least I'll stick by that. I'll stick by that story. So yeah, and certainly, unsurprisingly, the Douglas Laing family are very dog orientated. So
the fox terrier is like a breed that the family have owned.
Yeah, so the terrier on the bottle is Binks. So it is actually inspired by the Laing family dog. Not present, sadly, Binks is no longer with us. Cooper is the present wire fox terrier, the Laing family, Fred's dog. But yeah, certainly as a family, they've always loved the wire fox terrier element. But it wasn't necessarily like we went out to create the regional malts in the first place with this style choices. It was initially, we had Big Pete. Skywag didn't follow till 4 years later. It was like we had Big Pete going. And then we realised, well, we've got the big Isla, if you like, so let's do the contrasts. We thought sherried, Speyside, and then we realised after that there's something here. And so each year following, we then released the Highlands, Lowlands, Campbelltown, and our Islands bottling. So kind of the whole regional series came from Big Pete, but it wasn't a planned out initial set or series or anything like that. So kind of spawned off as we've got something here, let's run with it. And now the regional malts are bigger than the single cask Indy Bottling side for us. So
are they? Yeah.
Certainly. It's a fun way for people to get into whiskey, though, isn't it? Because quite often people's first whiskey education is learning it by the regions. So if you can just do that through your selection, it's a fun way of getting into it.
Yeah, and certainly, again, we're playing on kind of Fred Carr's experience and certainly their kind of expertise and how we put them together and construct them. I'd say we're fully aware that there is plenty of heavy peated lowland whiskey today and some light, delicate Isla whiskey today. And what I think it's almost like we're trying to go for a classic expression or a homage to a classic expression of each region. So we are fully aware that this is not the only set of style, but if someone's wanting the kind of essence of the lowlands, so we've gone quite green, quite floral, quite fresh. Isla there's hints of medicinal with Big Pete, there's hints of ashiness, but there's also the sweetness, and so certainly finding a balancing point. But we're not trying to say this is every style. This is just a good example of.
Yeah. I think did Ian ask a question about somebody asked a question about whether some of the newer Isla.
Ian asked a lot of questions just in a row here. He's.
I think he asked if the newer Isla distilleries was going to go into Big Pete somewhere. Was that? Yeah. Did I see that somewhere?
Yeah.
I think Oll's opinion would be. I think if what can I say and can't say. So I said that Big Pete's recipe has changed over the years, if you like, and been adapted. If you think about what we do as an independent bottler and how we get liquid, early on, Douglas Laing's history was essentially buying a cask for cash. And then it became more about getting filling contracts with individual distilleries. We might get 3,000 litres of X distillery for 5 years. So we know we can now settle in and make something like Big Pete because we've signed up contracts with individual distilleries to continuously produce it. So that's how we get the chance to do that. But if a contract runs out and we can't renew it, then we'll start looking for a distillery with a similar profile that we can substitute in and out. Or we can always adapt to liquid. This is the fun and the interesting bit about blends and why, when there's so many different distilleries out there, you can keep the essence of something like Big Pete going, even if we're adapting the recipe a little bit, because of Big Pete being this balance. You can play around with it, tweak it as we go. And it's also small batch. I think people forget, even though Big Pete's kind of everywhere in the world, it's like 75 odd countries, it's still small batch stuff. So it means there is this wonderful natural variation that you kind of start to miss with the big producers. We're not trying to make identical whiskey every single time. Batch to batch, there could be a small variation of Big Pete. The essence of Big Pete's there. It's still very much Big Pete, but there'll still be this kind of natural cask fluctuation. As we all know in whiskey, two sister casks can taste totally different. So that's what we're kind of reacting to. So in terms of new distilleries, it depends on our relationships. I think certainly we've been very lucky, and I think we're generally held in pretty high esteem in the whiskey world, that thanks to Fred's dad and then Fred and now Cara, we're in a very good position with a lot of distilleries where both new and old, we could still have relationships where we can get access to a lot of spirit that we want. Mm-hmm. There's always going to be challenges. Whiskey at the moment, everyone's worried about their supply. This is universal across the whiskey industry. There's a lot more kind of playing your cards a little bit close to your chest. Everyone's kind of waiting to see what happens in terms of single malt demand and supply. So therefore, blenders, indie bottlers, it's a very challenging world that we're in. So that's kind of, everyone's pretty well aware of that in the whiskey world, that it's more and more of a challenge to get access to liquid. Not the grand plan, but certainly the appeal for us to have something like our own single malt distillery like Strathearn. If you look in a bottle of Timmer's Beastie today, you'll notice one of the distilleries now featured on it is Strathearn. We're now utilising our own single malt in the blended malt side. So it's literally we're developing it to support other elements of the business. Mm. And likewise, with our kind of future plans for our Glasgow distillery, that will eventually start feeding into the Epicurean and also give us spirit to trade. And that's the end goal. When you have the ability to say, we'll give you 1,000 litres of this for 1,000 litres of that, then you're in a really good position with spirit trading as a kind of bigger gang, if you like. So.
Okay. Interesting. That's, I think we knew independent bottlers are certainly bought spirit. Gordon MacPhail probably being the biggest one for buying spirit rather than buying casks. It's good to see that some of you guys are doing that as well. It is you have full control over that maturation of that spirit as well.
Exactly, because I think for a lot of people, there's this like misconception or just misunderstanding and what an independent bottler actually is. There's there's a group of people that believe that all we do is buy a cask and put it in a bottle, which is the case with some independent bottlers, some of the newer guys. Douglas Laing, this is our 75th year anniversary. We've got a lot of fun things planned, but that's 75 years of relationship building. That's 75 years of making the connections we need to get access to the spirit. So we're in a good place in terms of, okay, we know we're getting this liquid. We've got our own supply of casks. We've got our own direct connections to different individual cask suppliers. So it gives us full control of what we do.
Sorry, my wife has just walked in with I'm not sure if you can see. She's holding a baby and has just got baby sick all down her.
Ah, lovely.
So,
how to sell children is this?
Anyone want to buy?
There's not much no trading in that. It's whiskey only. I get full circle back to Ian's question. I think there is. I would never say never, and the recipes can be adapted, but it's more about making sure that we keep the kind of brand identity there. If anyone's picked up a bottle of Big Pete from 2009-10, Lafroig is listed on the ingredients. Yeah. It no longer is. It shows you that these things can develop. Same with Scallywag. Scallywag used to feature a lot of Inchgower. We now feature a lot of Glenrothes. So the recipes can change and adapt over the years, which I think is quite nice.
It's nice that you're honest, so people don't feel like they've been, duped. You're very honest about what's in it. So it's quite refreshing.
Yeah, a lot of it's contractual. We can name what we can name, and if we can name it, we'll name it. That's generally our kind of approach to it, and that kind of same with like the old particular bottling you just picked up, Mike, in terms of it tells you everything we possibly can tell you. You've got distilled date, you've got distillery, you've got ages, you've got cask type, you've got number of bottles, what we've done to it. It's really, hopefully, as transparent as we can try and be. So we're not quite in the QR codes and scanning to the field that it was grown in yet, but as everyone knows in the world of whiskey, again, the traceability and kind of that provenance of your liquid is very important. So,
a couple of Ian's other questions on YouTube: are the remarkable malts, available in the Australian market? And is Big Pete based from Captain Haddock from Tintin?
I'll take Australian market first. Ian, we are presently signing up with a distributor in Australia. We're kind of at that point, so nothing direct at the moment, but it should still be available. Definitely, kind of some of your bigger ones, like your Big Pete and Scallywag, should generally be available, but they will become more readily available in the next year or two. So they are coming more and more. Is Big Pete based in Captain Haddock? I understand it. I get it a lot. People see that we've got Captain Haddock and essentially Snowy, and I see where they're coming from. There's a reason Big Pete looks that way, and certainly there's lots of stories that float around the kind of creation of Big Pete as a character. When Fred kind of first created it, at the time, like I say, there was nothing else quite like it in the market. The attitude towards blending and the attitudes towards blended whiskey, if you like, was still quite negative, and kind of this part of that is we are suffering from a history where cheap blends were in the market, and it was just kind of pumped out and a bit rough around the edges, and people assumed blended malt was something similar. But yeah, certainly Fred put it together because we were sitting on some really good stock, and it was a way of us utilizing it in a different way. And essentially all he did was have a few different choices, a few different elements of how he could put it together. And really he saw it as you can either go very dry or you can go sweet with the Islay side. And we went down the sweet route. And if anyone knows Big Pete pretty well, it's actually a really nicely sweet whiskey as soon as you get over that initial kind of big peatiness, if you like. So yeah, essentially he put so it's super light, super fruity. Yes, it's peated, but it's actually pretty sweet in the grand scheme of things. But yeah, he essentially put that initial recipe together. I was taking it to the kind of whiskey shows that I go to and cover today. So literally was taking it as like an under the table dram at a whiskey festival and starting letting people try it and knows it. And early on, he essentially gave my predecessor, Jan, if anyone's kind of followed Douglas Laing for a while, they'll know who Jan is. But essentially one of the earliest reactions was Big Pete. And that was like a very early kind of gut reaction to smelling it. And Fred had this instant vision. And so he had this idea. And the reason Big Pete looks the way it is, essentially his vision was this Islay fisherman lost at sea for a few days. The beard is grown out scraggly, and he realizes he has to make his way back, and he eventually gets his way back. And in preparation for facing his wife overall is a big gulp of Islay whiskey or cast strength Islay whiskey. And for a lot of people, that face is pretty familiar for the first smell, the first taste of Islay whiskey. So Big Pete is this Islay fisherman with a big heavy dram of smoky whiskey in the mouth. It's that instant gut reaction to it. That's kind of where the story goes.
He looks like the skipper that used to drive the ferry at the island I lived on, actually. I think they're
and I've heard from plenty Islais that there's plenty of people on Islay that still look like Big Pete. So
nailed it.
Yeah, I love, and that's the thing, like all the stories. So if you ever look at a bottle of, give me 1 second, guys, I'll grab a bottle. So each of the regional malts has a story, and there's a reason each label looks the way it looks. And something like Scallywag, I'll see if I can get it into the camera. So our Wire Fox Terrier, you'll notice, is missing a tooth. I'm hoping my camera is good enough. Okay. So it's missing a tooth. That's accurate to the real Binks. So Binks, really? So there's that really nice element of tying in the family through all the bottlings and stuff.
I've never noticed that before. I've always noticed the monocle, but never the tooth.
I don't think the monocle was generally always worn, but the rest of it. But I love that, like that kind of every there's a reason all the bottles look the way they do.
That's fun. It's like the boutique whiskey, isn't it? You're always like searching the label, trying to figure out like what the thing is about the label.
It's just another way we can add value to the whiskey. It's something interesting. I say that the bottling you can kind of see in my far left, if you like, because that smokehouse bottling just looks phenomenal. So, and people often buy whiskey based on looks and how it looks, and it's a reaction to it. That is really fun to look at. It's something different, which is kind of nice.
Your ceramic bottles are so cute. They've got the most
your bottles.
Yeah, the sort of like the alliteration going on there. Like if I could be the person that was paid to write that, I would. Like it's absolutely fantastic. It's so quirky.
So that's Fred. That's all Fred. You'll notice if you I don't have a bottle of.
All the bottles have the initials of who's doing the tasting notes, whether it's Fred or Cara, don't they?
Don't worry, I've got one.
So if you ever get a single cask,
perhaps, Kat.
beautiful. So again, that is really a part of kind of history. So Douglas Laing in the late 80s, early 90s, we were shipping huge amounts to Asia and kind of South America, and we're doing loads of decanters and that kind of almost novelty element, if you like. We did golf clubs, we did golf bags filled with whiskey, we did everything, but it was all kind of a ceramic stuff. So that's the Premier Barrel kind of remains this like homage to how we were successful and how we survived in that kind of late 80s decline in whiskey. We won a Queen's Award for Trade in the same year that about 7 distilleries closed because we were doing some interesting things and going to a different way. But I was going to point out with any of our kind of old particular bottlings and kind of any of our single cask bottlings, see it again if I can get it. So if you notice right down the very bottom, you've got that set of initials. And so each one is traced back to individual family members. So you've got CSL, so you've got a Cara, whereas I've got an FHL, you've got a Fred. So again, these small touches that really kind of link you into the company.
That's lovely.
So you know, CSL and a CGL.
So CGL is Chris, who's no longer with the company. CSL is Cara, and FHL is Fred. So you know exactly which family member worked with each individual cask. That means they signed off that individual cask for bottling, and they did the tasting notes. So
I thought it was just the tasting notes, but they've manage that cask from person to bottle.
Essentially, that cask sample has been put on their desk to say, this is what we're looking at bottling. They'll then nose it, sign it off, say, yep, it's good to go. Because often we'll not refuse a cask, but we'll be like, no, it needs longer, needs more time to develop. Or we might realize it's something going in a really good direction, so we want to see what develops. So it's this really nice cask by cask nature that kind of, again, it's this small batch stuff. It's 200 bottles, 300 bottles at a time. At the moment, we do about, I think it's nearly almost a cask per day. It's about 60 casks per every 2 months or so, every kind of 60 days. So yeah, pretty substantial numbers of casks going through.
So I was just wondering what Rick's shouty capitals were for, but I just realised he's won a bet based on the story about the dog's tooth. I'm glad we've helped you out there, Rick.
That's what I'm here for. I'm only here to win bets.
I'm not sure if he's going to win a bet, as in he's going to place a bet on a story of that and dupe somebody out of money with that information, or if he's actually knew that story or heard that story and somebody didn't believe him, so there was a bet on it. So Rick, let us know what the actual story was. Yeah. That's pretty good. I love that story. And now it's all I'm going to look at when I see a bottle of Scallywag is look for this tooth. And I guess that's across all the Scallywag range. Every dog will have a missing tooth.
Yep, always a missing tooth.
That's cute.
Yeah, like I say, that's the fun elements that kind of tie all together.
You'll have to do a competition or something, and there'll be one bottle out there with a dog that's got its tooth, and if you find it, you win a prize or something.
Golden tooth
golden tooth.
The Willy Wonka ticket. Well, that's quite a good idea.
Well, maybe keep that one to ourselves, and we'll get Tony to Photoshop it into a label.
Well, yeah, too late. How many people we've got watching? These guys are gonna get the head start with it. How are we doing with it? Have we missed too many questions?
I think I was going to come back to Jeremy, who's watching on Facebook, and you kind of did cover part of this, but this is more specific about the indies. So quite a few independent bottlers like yourself now have their own distillery. Are you trading with these guys with Spirit? Guys like Arden Merkin, I suppose.
I'd say are probably more in the kind of never say never kind of category. I think because one was making sure we have set supply for kind of the regional malt, so we know we're set with them, and then it's a case of Kat, we talked about it as well in terms of its whiskies are very not just friendly, but there's a lot of interaction that maybe people don't expect. Like we're in constant contact with everyone in the whiskey world. And so often we might have a different group of people come to us, oh, we got these casks, we're not going to do anything with them. Do you want them? And there'll be an offer there, and we'll see if there's a trading option. Someone will approach us and say, oh, do you have anything like this age of this distillery? We're looking for 3 casks or 5 casks.
Okay.
So that happens quite a lot. I couldn't necessarily say in terms of are we directly dealing with other individuals in terms of indie bottling world, but certainly I think it's about making sure there's a collaborative element to get access to other things. There's a business element, of course, but it allows us to have this really wide range portfolio. The last thing we really kind of want to be in a position, and it's happened to me occasionally, like you walk in and every single independent bottler's got a Kalila single cask at 10 years old. That happens because a lot of us have good access to something like Kalila, whereas it's the small stuff that's really interesting, like distilleries that you don't normally get a chance to try, or everyone's got a personal relationship. Like we've always been very lucky. We're one of the few indie bottlers that have we've had very good access to Arran very early on. And so we had not many indie bottlers that had released indie bottlings of Arran. So we got a lot of that kind of good stuff. So it's one of these kind of things of we're reliant on relationships built up, but never say never. I guess it's certainly a case of we're all pretty friendly to the best extent to be friendly in a business world.
Yeah. I guess you're celebrating 75 years. So in the next 75 years, these guys will become the established distilleries that you're working with every day in their companies.
Yeah. And likewise, we'll be in a position ourselves with our own distilleries as well. So
interesting. Is there? Do you get involved? Have you got your initials on a label yet?
Not yet. Maybe coming. It's in the works. I'm not a family member. I have no. I hold no. I'm not holding my breath for anything. But have I done tasting notes for certain single casks? Yes. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, certainly you never know what will happen.
Have you got like a dream? If you could pick any whiskey in any cask, have you got like a sort of dream selection you'd go for?
Dream selection. Well, in debate. So for me, the fun element, and it's always like in the background. So I'm a cask owner at Lag, so our new Arran distillery, and obviously working with an indie bottler, it would be quite fun to see it through to fruition and then do like the brand ambassador or particular bottling of Lag, where it's my own cask bottled with the Douglas Laing kind of influence. That'd be quite fun to be able to do. Like, this is not only I've seen this cask from day zero right through to its kind of in the bottle, and not only that, I've watched it go in the bottle live, and then I'm the one doing the tasting notes, and then I'm the one bottling. Like, that'd be a nice kind of full circle moment, I think.
It would. Did I read that Lag are using like beer barley, like they're doing a sort of heritage?
Lots of different things, yeah. So we're doing some beer barley kind of heritage bottling as well, but there's a lot of fun things going on there. I've got a lot of love. Like my mum and dad met in that Isle of Arran, so
lovely.
We've still got very strong ties to Ireland, and they were there for the opening of Lacranza, and so therefore, when Lag started, I worked in whiskey. It seemed like a nice full circle moment for me to do that. So I've got my kind of brick in the wall at Lag as kind of like, that's my family ties. Like, I wouldn't exist without the Isle of Arran, so I quite like it. And I definitely always have a soft spot.
Oh, that's a lovely story. That's really nice.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I've got a great question here now from Ian on YouTube. If Dougal had to design a label, does he have
That's
a
good question.
That's really interesting. I appreciate there's always a temptation to go for like my own dog and do my own Jura on the bottle, but then I feel like I'd have to bottle Jura, otherwise that would get really confusing. I don't know.
I mean, you've got quite a good beard. I think we'd have to have something like sort of you in profile with the beard. Like, it has to be maybe, I don't know.
You can't guarantee it. But then am I just poaching the Big Pete look? I'm doing my best to kind of slowly cultivate the Big Pete look.
I was gonna say it's more like a very neat and tidy Big Pete.
I'm not quite as wild as Big Pete as
like instead of Big Pete, like the well trimmed Dougal. It doesn't flow off the tongue as well, to be honest.
Yeah, like
neat Pete.
I'm worried neat Pete works, but I'm worried I'm more like the hipster Pete. I feel like I'm more kind of the tattooed, rolled sleeves kind of look. So I feel like that's more.
Own it though, yeah.
That's the fun thing. So I actually in a few weeks got one of the gentlemen visiting, but there's over 20 people in the world with a Big Pete tattoo.
Really?
full cult following. So it's a gentleman called Gunter is coming over from Germany, and he's one of the guys that he's got Big Pete tattooed in his calf. So
Did you get anything for that?
I mean, I'm sure he's getting to come to. He's going to spend an afternoon with me in the Douglas Laing archive room, which is a pretty good place to spend an afternoon. I can promise you.
I'm booking in the tattoo tomorrow. Absolutely.
Yep.
Maybe you need to get a tattoo of Gunter by the end of it. Like, yeah, this could be the start of something special.
Full circle, but yes, it's funny because we did a Big Pete. Was it metal edition or biker edition, where it's kind of like Big Pete with his sleeves rolled up and full tattoos and things like that. So again, it's the fun element of the branding, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's endless, isn't it? What you can do with somebody like that, a character who can appeal to so many people.
Yeah, and it's been really fun to see all the kind of different nationalities, because a lot of the time it's kind of putting Big Pete in traditional dress and stuff like that. There's a lot of really cool stuff like that, and certainly like interweaving like cultural elements of each nation that we've done it with is quite fun. It's quite interesting.
Have you got a favorite country or whiskey festival that you've done so far that it's kind of like nailed
good
your
question.
role? I follow you on Instagram, so I'm always like, where is he now? Where is he now?
Yeah. So I loved Whisky Life Taiwan. Was pretty amazing. So that was Taipei. That was pretty epic. One I did quite recently. So there's one in Germany called Limburg, and if anyone goes to any like whiskey, it's like the geek capital. Is like food, like very like a bit loose, a bit wild. Like every stand's kind of on top of each other. It's just kind of very much tables and things like that. But in terms of a really knowledgeable crowd, it was really, really good in that form. I'm a sucker for just like sometimes whiskey festivals are in like a sports hall or something like that, where somewhere like Lyon is in a municipal palace element, so it's all white marble and fresco ceilings and things like that. So there's that kind of stuff where you get a surprise venue that's just really, really good. Big fan of Milan. I like Milan. It's hard to say, because I always tend to go. There's some that you kind of do every year, and then there's kind of new ones developing every year. Certainly, we are in Dutch supplier. The Art of Drinks in Amsterdam is only 3 years old. This is the third year they've done it, but it's very, very cool. And I've done with our main distributor out in the Netherlands, but very, very cool setup.
It looks like a lot of fun. A lot of hard work as well, though. A lot of traveling, a lot of setting up, a lot of.
So my flights next week, I'll be on flight number 37 and 38 of the year so far.
Yeah, I think Kenny McDonald. Kenny.
Yeah,
He was saying, what did he say to us, Mike? They'd have been home like how many days out of the year? Like
17 days or something. Give it at home.
I know it's full on.
I guess the difference is that there is only Kenny and Christina.
Victoria.
Victoria. Sorry.
You end up you get used to living in Schiphol in Amsterdam, living in Heathrow, and you get used to your suitcase going missing, and you get used to living in a hotel room, changing hotels. It can be pretty hectic, but it's really interesting. It just kind of highlights the nature of when we drink whiskey and when the festivals are. So January, February, March into April, I did kind of essentially almost 10 weeks on the road. Like I worked 9 weekends out of 10. I was constant, and then the summer's pretty relaxed. It's quite nice. So I got to do the Fèis in Islay. So we do that with Big Pete now, and that's kind of our second year doing it, with next year already in planning. So it's quite nice to do some of the more Scottish ones. I came up in Inverness in a couple of weeks' time, and doing and then likewise just back from Robbie's Drams and there, some whiskey and all that. So quite nice to do some of the more local. It's nice to do some Scottish ones every now and then. And then, come August, September, it just goes nuts again. And then you're right through to kind of beginning of December. It's, pros and cons to every job. I love my job. I get to talk about whiskey for a living. I can't ever complain about it.
Yeah.
Does it mean that living out of a suitcase and spending a lot of time in airports and on planes gets a bit of a drag? Absolutely, it does.
Yeah,
Well, you've got Ian Bruce, who is moving to Australia soon. He's offering to be your rep out down under. So,
it's a tough category down there. I've got a lot of family in Australia as well, and I would never say no to move to Australia. Like it's, but it's really just I'm quite lucky in the grand scheme of things in terms of covering global stuff, because John's based essentially out of Taipei, but he covers kind of most of our Asia side, so I don't have to do any of the super long haul all the time, which is quite nice. So I'm mostly kind of European hopping with the odd Canada, US trip in there. So that's quite, some people that are covering full world is a pretty brutal schedule.
Yeah.
Because when you do these big trips, you're away for 10, 12, 2 weeks. It can be a pretty hefty amount of time to go away for.
Yeah.
Is it Glasgow you're based out of? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, like I say, if you're going to a region, then you got to make sure that trip's worthwhile and maybe put together 3-4 events.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was in Canada in January, I did, I think it was it 8 or 9 flights in a 11-day window, something like that. So I kind of did, Glasgow, New York, Calgary, Edmonton back down to Calgary to Victoria and BC, or Vancouver and BC, Vancouver over to Victoria back to Vancouver direct to London, but then straight in 2 hours London to go to Dusseldorf, and 2 days in Dusseldorf back to Scotland. So it was like, I had no idea what time zone I was in for a few days, because it was a Burns tasting I happened to be doing at Dusseldorf on the way back. So, but Dusseldorf via London, coming back from Vancouver, just left me in no idea what time of day I was in. So that's when the job becomes less glamorous.
Yeah. I feel more sorry for the person that's organising your flights. That's a serious itinerary that they're like shoving in for you there.
A lot of the time, I try and book all my own stuff. It's interesting when people. It's one of these weird background stuff. So some people work through kind of corporate traveler and things like that, where we get our company essentially we pay to help us organise this stuff, or we book it ourselves. I quite like booking everything myself because I'm a planner, so I like to know I'm booking my own schedule, my own hotels. So there's something nice about being in full control of that. So yeah, it's just making sure you know exactly what you're doing in each place.
Doesn't work out in whiskey. You'd be like a banging PA. You'd like have that nailed. Like that's some serious organising skills.
Very good at colour coordinated calendars, as it turns out. So.
I bet.
I'm impressed that Rick has managed to stick around for an hour and 15 with us to pour his first dram, because it's now noon in San Francisco. So he's pouring a Timorous Beastie over there.
Oh, fantastic.
I gotta say, I'm really enjoying this Glenrothes. Really, really good dram. I don't think you'll be able to get it anymore, guys, unfortunately, but bottled in 2020. So yeah, I'm pretty sure I won that in a raffle the first year of lockdown. So really impressed.
Yeah, lots of people know us, but and I appreciate from your guys' background as well. But like lots of people know us for Old Particular branding and the Provenance branding, but they don't realize that Provenance is really there to be like, before any cask dominance is taking over, we want to celebrate distillery style. It is really there to be like, this is this is Glenrothes DNA done in a Douglas Laing kind of way. Old Particulars, kind of this right cask, right moment, right distillery, and then our XOP, our extra Old Particulars, kind of creme de la creme. But I love the Provenance series because you get amazing value for what you're looking for. Like you get young stuff.
They're all kind of 10 years and under, aren't they?
Yeah, so the rough split is kind of 10, 12 years and younger goes into Provenance, 12 to 21, say, for Old Particular, 21, 22 and up for XOP. But it's not to say that there won't be a bottle that creeps into one or the other, depending. Yeah. Again, it's coming back to that kind of cask by cask nature, where it's this. Fred was adamant, I think it was it Knockrosk or something similar. But essentially, it was a 9-year-old that Fred was adamant should be an Old Particular. Like we've done like an 8-year-old Talisker, an Old Particular before. And likewise, we've kind of done 11, 12-year-old Provenance because we feel like it's a really good example of distillery style. So it's quite nice where there's there's flexibility there for us to play around with. But yeah, rough ideas. Yeah, provenance is your gateway into the world of single cask, single malts. Old Particular is your staple, and then XOP is something special.
Awesome.
Cool. Rick's autocorrect keeps changing your name to Douglas. But...
happens. My own phone does it as well. And like I say, being Douglas Laing Dougal is just yeah. There's a reason when I go to Starbucks I say my name is Dave. It's just easier.
I suppose it'd be more complicated if it was Douglas, because you'd be Douglas Laing, Douglas Laing, Douglas, and then people would really think you're the big cheese.
Yeah, not a family member. So, but yeah, Dougal's an interesting name. It's certainly in Scotland great. It gives me real authenticity. Outside of Scotland is a real challenge.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones. Maybe other than Ireland, maybe you don't really hear Dougal very often anywhere else, do you? It's a great name, though.
I mean, there's no questioning the heritage, I guess. So
no, unless the parents were big Magic Roundabout fans, I suppose.
Yeah, Father Ted and Magic Roundabout. That's the two options. Yeah. Although now, I mean, I've never watched a single episode of it, but now because of Outlander, like loads of Americans know it again. So
yeah.
Is there a Dougal? Oh, there is a Dougal in Outlander, isn't there?
Is he not the kind of uncle?
He's the one. They travel around Scotland together, don't they? Like that.
Yeah.
Two actors. That's right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
So it's brought me back into relevance.
It'll be up there on the lists as top names used. Yeah, just wait.
It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, popular names. So this will be on to the Big Pete now, the red wine cask.
Yeah, so this is kind of taking like classic Big Pete, but adding a twist and a layer that we've not had in there before. I'm a sucker for red wine casking. I don't think.
Me too.
If I'm less inclined by choosing a favorite distillery, bourbon casking followed by a wine finish is probably, like, especially red wine finish, is where
I think we were removed at birth. We should go drinking like this.
Yeah, go start sneaking things out.
Yes.
I just love it, but it's Gary as well. And if maybe when I'm on, you can have like a Auchentoshan. If I mention Auchentoshan, you can say drink as well. But Auchie was doing.
I kept one behind just in case. So I thought, well, I'll get rid of the Auchentoshan.
They're honestly some of the stuff I've still got left over in terms of like some of the distillery casks, but like Auchie with red wine casking, just unbelievably good. And I love it because I'm not a big sherry influence. Sherry does nothing for me. It's just not my flavor, not my palate at all. Whereas bourbon with red wine casking for me is like the sweet spot, and introducing that with Big Pete is just a really nice place because like Big Pete's generally refill like first and second fill bourbon barrels and bourbon hogsheads, but then introducing it's over a year maturation in old world wine, shall we say? We're not specific about it, but there's only a couple options you can really have for this kind of. The smokehouse kind of gives it away in terms of what kind of wine we might be working with, but it works wonderfully, and it's really interesting when we did the first kind of cast sampling and regauge of it. It came out almost bright pink. It was like this kind of almost like rosé color, so we had to actually age up a little bit further to get a bit darker to be acceptable for kind of whiskey bottling, if you like, for whiskey colors. So yeah, it's for me my favorite Big Pete we've done, and I'm hoping there's some red wine cast tucked away that we're working with. Nice.
Is that cast strength?
No, not cast strength this year. So the festival and say like Christmas with Big Pete has always been cast strength Big Pete. The festival has always been either a remix of the marriage or cast strength, depending on what we're doing. But now with the cask influences this year, there's been a lot. So like I say, we did like golden sherry. We've got a few more coming that are really interesting that I can't talk about yet, but I'm very excited to talk about very, very soon.
Might have put my foot in earlier on, but
no, it's fine. But even like last year with like Rock Island and Mezcal and things like that. So really working with interesting cask influence and stuff that maybe we've not seen before in terms of like our bottling. So yeah, Big Pete and red wine not been seen before. So it was really fun to do, and the feedback from it has been really, really good.
It's got such a good nose in it. Like last night I was just nosing it and it just smelled so good.
It's got like a sticky barbecue sauce.
Yeah, over in the festival, we actually did a steak night one night, so we're actually just doing like barbecue steaks, and you can see exactly why. Like it's perfect pairing.
Absolutely. It's quite earthy. It's got like big sort of red fruits in it, like sort of cherries. It's really, really nice. Really good.
Yeah, I always really like Big Peak because you can kind of dissect it a little bit. Not to the same extent you can kind of dissect something like Rock Island from us, where you can really start splitting apart the individual elements. But Big Peak, you get the Kalila freshness, saltiness, you get the Ardbeg dryness, the ashiness, you get the Bowmore giving you that kind of full-bodied, juicy, or a little bit more body to the whiskey, if you like. So you get all the individual elements, and then they all kind of complement each other. And then that red wine cask finish is just, really good.
Mm.
We'll need to get some in the shop, Mike, because we've literally been talking about it for ages. Everybody's going to want to try.
We've got an order of Douglas Laing coming in probably next week, I think, actually. Some of the new releases coming in. So looking forward to that. Not so much the blends, but the problems. But I might have to add one of this on. To the order.
If you're lucky enough to still get some, sadly it disappears very quickly.
Right, yeah.
This was a pretty healthy batch, but like last year the Mezcal Rock Island, I think it was only 1,500 bottles we did, so it was really small scale stuff, but it was phenomenal. And
it used to be Rock Oyster, didn't it? Rock Island.
Yeah, so Rock Oyster and Rock Island is one and the same as such. Some of the early feedback is people assumed it was going to taste like oysters. and so therefore we had to be maybe a bit more particular about it, and I think Rock Island potentially suits it better. It gives more of that kind of, it's going to be coastal, it's going to be salty, it's going to be a bit more oceanic, I guess, depending on what way you view it. But I think Rock Island is a bit more, it's an easier sell potentially, and certainly between the Gauldrons and Rock Island is my favorite of the blend. Like I love the salty elements coming in, and I love the variation you get in it. And Rock Island, there's not many whiskies that taste like it. It's quite unique. So for me, I've often described it, and it's not naming distilleries in it, but it's kind of like if Talisker and Old Pulteney had a baby. It's kind of got oiliness, it's got saltiness, it's got peated, it's got loads of elements in there. So I think
we use it quite often. I run the Whiskey Ambassador course from the shop, and quite often the exam for that is you have to nose 4 whiskies and get the coastal, get the peat, get the citrus and the vanilla as the 4 kind of flavors you have to go. And I quite often use Rock Oyster for that coastal example. Rock Island, sorry, is the coastal example. Because it has that real, as you say, that real nice saline, salty.
It smells like standing on a beach in Scotland. Like it does exactly what you'd expect of it. Again, kind of. It highlights one, the quality it's going in, but 2, the stuff we get to work with is really good place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Rock Island doesn't have a character to it, does it? And I don't think the Gauldrons does. Does the Gauldrons have?
So Gauldrons has a story, and there's a reason it looks like it. But again, I think I've got my props ready. So.
Sorry.
So Rock Island, it has the oyster on it in terms of like that perfect seafood pairing, and very similar to your kind of ale experience. Like Rock Island on an oyster is perfect, but at the same time it's got this wonderful kind of citrus saltiness to it. The Gauldrons, one kind of that Campbelltown mystique, but for Gauldrons means the Bays of Storms essentially. So it's really it's kind of inspired by that rough, ready West Coast kind of rocky cave systems down the west coast over Campbelltown, and the kind of imagery on it, and the reason it's kind of the spider's web is hopefully I appreciate we're kind of an international group in there in the chat, but the idea of Robert the Bruce making his way to a sea cave, some arguments for our Arran, some arguments for some caves down the Kintyre Peninsula, but that idea of him seeing the spider in the sea cave and kind of being inspired by the spider making its web over and over and over again. So that's why we kind of included that on the Gauldrons bottling, is they're very much inspired by that kind of, again, coastal, but a little bit more mystery and kind of storied elements of Campbelltown. So
I didn't know that. I didn't even notice it was a spider web. I just thought it was quite a funky, cool kind of.
Yeah, it's cool.
I got a compass kind of feel to it.
Yeah, so you've got that kind of maritime
But,
coastal element, spider in the middle, and then the spider's web going all the way around it. So
That's really cool. That's the sort of story everybody gets told at primary school, isn't it? You know, Robert the Bruce in the cave with the spider that keeps on trying.
yeah, every area in Scotland has some kind of claim to Robert the Bruce hiding in a cave nearby.
I know. That's the rock he stood on. That's the cave he was in. That's the tree scalped his knee on. Like, Abdi's got some sort of claim to Robert the Bruce.
I mean, I'm saying
you've been out behind that cat. You've got we've got Barra Hill with the Robert the Bruce.
Well, that's genuine. That's where the Battle of Barra took place, and the harrying of the common up Bottle Hill. The rock he was meant to stand on. I don't know if that's true, but that's definitely where the battle site was. But you probably know that, Dougal, anyway, from all your Scottish history side of things.
Yeah, like I'm from Ayrshire, so like one, Burns country, and two, like everyone has a myth about the Sawney Bean Cave and the Cannibal Cave and things like that as well. So yeah, there's all these stories, which is nice.
Yes.
Rick is winning a lot of money tonight. He's going to win money with that story too.
Or no, we'll forget about our social media side. Annie will ask a question for a competition win on douglaslaing.com, and I'll have forgotten that I've told everyone the story already.
We're going to have some winners here tonight anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Rick is asking how many casts. I don't know if he's got a bet on this and he's wanting the answer for it, but how many casts do you reckon you're sitting on at Douglas Laing?
It is in constant flux. There's a safe bet is somewhere between 16 and 20,000.
Okay.
Wow.
But that's at the moment, and in terms of our kind of scalability as a company, not to go like too boring with it, but essentially for every cask that we're emptying, we're filling around 4. So we've grown a lot as a company. Like when you look at the history of the company, 2009 when kind of started, and then towards like Cara joining kind of 2012, 2013, that kind of last 10 years or so, company was sitting at less than 10 people, and today we're touching 60. So
wow,
gosh,
it's been pretty significant growth in the last decade. So in terms of kind of making sure our stock and supply is there, we're having to fill a lot. Like if anyone's taking a drive past our warehouses at Glasgow with our Big Pete warehouse just beside Glasgow Airport, we've got these 2 huge warehouses that we'll have filled in the next month to 2 months probably. And so a lot of our stock, especially the older stuff, because we're sitting on some whiskies dating all the way back to the late 50s, early 60s and still in cask, we're not moving that around into our own warehousing and things like that. So that's generally still sitting with the distilleries. So our stock is quite spread out. We're probably now sitting on maybe 20% or so in Glasgow. So,
interesting. No, that's good. Got a lot of casks, and is that included? Sorry, did you say included or excluding Strathearn?
That's I would probably throw Strathearn in there as well. Just we got hundreds of the mini casks, so I had 4 of them in to make one whole one. But yeah, I'd probably say including Strathearn in there as well.
Nice.
Like I say, it's kind of constant. It's kind of hard to put a number on it because it's in constant flux. Like it's constant emptying, constant filling.
Cool. We've got Ian is asking, and even I can answer this one, Ian. Does Douglas Laing have a selection of each expression of Rock Island, Epicurean, Goldwins, etc. as samples? Yes, they do. You can get the wee gift packets. I think it's around about £25-30. I think you can get the core expressions.
Yeah, the core mini pack as such. Yeah. So it's quite good. It's interesting. So Douglas Laing entered the travel retail world with a launch in 2020, which was maybe not the best time to launch a travel retail pack, as it turns out. But one of the main things we've been really successful, one really hugely positive feedback, and our travel retail is absolutely flying for us at the moment, is our regional 6-pack. And because you might often get a mini pack with 3 drams from one distillery, but to have the 6 regional malts all in one pack, it means it's this amazing gift because you're like, oh, there's a tour of Scotland, there's a tour of Scotland, there's a tour of Scotland. So the mini packs do really well. Yeah. But we don't have any. That's only for the kind of core bottlings of each. So in terms of the limited editions and that kind of thing, they're so fleeting that everything we have in terms of special edition is on allocation. So it's therefore it is small batches. Once it's done, it's done.
Yeah. Like Dominic's just asked, I think you've probably covered it there. What would be a good introduction to Remarkable Regions malt? I think the gift pack or the wee tasting pack would be a great introduction. If you want to buy 70cl, probably for me the Epicurean or the Scallywag would be the two.
I'd probably say Scallywag is most familiar for a lot of whiskey drinkers. That kind of heavy sherry influence, quintessential Speyside experience, some big names in there, and also just maybe more of that classic way people view whiskey in that like after dinner dram, sitting by a fire, a cold winter's night. That is Scallywag in a nutshell in the grand scheme of things. It's big sherry influence, but the regional malts themselves hopefully is just kind of this perfect introduction to all of Scotland just in a tasting series.
Right. You look like you're ready to say, you look like you're ready to say something there, Kat, but you stopped.
Well, I was going to ask. Well, I was going to just put it out there as well, because in terms of Rick with his bingo stories, so I read that. So the Douglas Laing story started with the King of Scotland blend. So I read in David Stirk's book last night that Idi Amin, the dictator of Uganda, who called himself the King of Scotland, ordered this en masse to kind of keep his dictatorship alive by giving it to his loyal soldiers. That's a crazy story. That's amazing.
Yes, so for anyone, I guess, so Douglas Laing officially, so when we get the name Douglas Laing, so it's Fred Douglas Laing. So that is the first generation. So current generation being Cara and her dad, Fred Hamilton Laing is what the H stands for in FHL.
Oh, okay.
So you've got two Freds. It just gets a bit confusing. So FDL, so Fred Douglas Laing, when he started the business, he was essentially working for an American company, but as kind of their sales export guy connection between Scotland and the US, selling oddly Scotch whiskey and champagne, which is not your classic example of Scottish export. But yeah, so they were selling this blend, which is actually King of Scots has been going since the 1880s as an actual blend. So it's not sadly not the King of Scotland. The King of Scots is the official blending name. But it was developed in the kind of early period of blending in terms of blends being king. And 48, technically 47, we actually started. So we started with Douglas McGibbons, which is the essentially Fred's mother's maiden name, if you like. So the McGibbons, so the Douglas McGibbons. So we started Douglas McGibbons in 47, then Douglas Laing was created as a company in 1948. But it was started, and I love the story of it because it just shows you where the world of whiskey was. So Fred Sr. was offered a chance to buy the King of Scots brand, just the overall branding, the recipe, and 3 casks of the blend. So the idea was he would have the 3 casks to then produce from. It was apparently the grand sum of £1. So all of Douglas Laing started from £1 transaction.
£1.
£1. So yeah, so it started literally with that rough core recipe, if you like, and from there built it. And the first kind of 20 to 30 years was just building stock to make the King of Scots. It was just about knocking on doors almost of, can I buy younger single malts in cask already, cash in hand kind of situation. Over the years that built up. Fred and his brother Stuart came into the business in the mid-60s, late 60s into early 70s, and slowly realised that not only did they have all these amazing whiskies for blending, we just had amazing whiskies for starting to put into bottle as kind of single cask, single malts. Fred Jr.'s kind of experience, he'd worked under Hartley White with the White Mackay, and basically gained his blending knowledge from there initially before working with his dad at all. Like he was being pulled out of school to go and work in Latin America, like trips to Panama and stuff like that. Fred's got some stories in terms of like literally working in the world of whiskey from the age of about 15. But yeah, certainly a minor celebrity in the whiskey world. But yes, it purely developed out of this building up stock for the King of Scots blend, which is we still make it today. We still produce it. It's still going strong. It still predominantly does really well in Asia and South America, so do a lot of volume there, but still kind of available. A really good all-around blend. It's got a very high percentage of malts in there, so overall quality of the blend is really good at very affordable price. The whole idea of Douglas Laing kind of spawned with this blend, and then from the amazing stocks built up, we had the chance to start bottling stuff as an Indy bottler, and then from there it kind of progressed. But right the way through into the 90s, 2000s, it was really kind of Asia duty-free market that we made our bread and butter. That was kind of certainly where our main focus was.
That's it. And the original Fred was a pilot in the Second World War. Is that right?
Yep, RAF pilot, and then and that's how he made his connections in the US. And then afterwards, like many people coming out of the Second World War, was very much looking for opportunity, and there was a lot of kind of younger guys coming out of the military that were looking for opportunity, and he clearly had a talent for sales and that kind of the chat, if you like. And as far as I've had this kind of ability is that Fred still has well in terms of picking up languages and getting across the points, if you like. And Fred will just surprise you every now and then. Just he'll burst into a different language with whoever you're meeting with. It's ridiculous, but yeah, certainly the overall story of Douglas Laing is really interesting as a family business going all the way through. So
they sound very tenacious. It couldn't have been easy picking up stock sort of pre-war. If they started like 1948, was it? I mean,
yeah, 48 is when they started. So
post-war, sorry, not pre-war, post-war. But it couldn't have been easy picking up stock. It must have been he must have been quite
listen, we'd seen the constriction of the world of whiskey go to its like lowest constricted point, mid-30s. So. And no one was really producing anything during the Second World War. So stocks were tight. And then, it's just about building up that relationship.
Yeah. Sounds amazing.
That's
nice company to work for.
Well, try to get Fred on a Blether as well. I can imagine some of the stories that he would have.
We have some great stories.
That's fantastic.
That's why we had him for Robbie's Drams last week. And he spent the entire time taking selfies with people. and signing bottles, so he's a man in demand, and
I can imagine. Yeah,
you would though if you got the chance, wouldn't you?
Yeah, what you mean, get a selfie of him?
Yeah, of course. all over the Instas.
Right, Dougal, it's been great having you on tonight. Thank you very much for your time, your stories, the drams.
Yeah, thank you.
Unfortunately, we didn't have enough to go around everyone, but me and Kat enjoyed.
I'm not sharing that. That's not being shared.
I would recommend if you see one of these red wine Big Pete's in the wild, definitely grab one. That is a really, really nice dram. We admittedly we don't do as much with Douglas Laing as I would like. Let's say we have got more coming in. And hopefully we'll continue to do that. Guys at home, if you enjoy what you've listened to, if you enjoy what you've or you like the brand, let us know. That it's something that you would be interested in, and we will get more. Is there a Blether discount code for the Douglas Laing website, Dougal?
God loves a trier, Dominic.
This is from Dominic. Yep, he loves it.
I would go for either at the moment if you put in the code ISLA10, ISLAY 10. As in the number 10, 10, or try dram 10, then it's probably a 10% off. One of those should work. So
there you go. So you don't ask, you don't get.
There you go. And I might just go and use that myself.
Yeah, I'm literally, it's the next thing I'm going to go and do. I'm going to go back. I love this whiskey.
Well, we're going to have to let Kat go because her internet gets shut off between 8:30 and 9:45.
I know, right? And all these guys are ready to buy it. I need to go get some.
Dougal, just before you go, we'd like to say thank you very much to you again. But next week, Kat, our guest,
we have somebody else who Dougal is very familiar with. We've got John Campbell on next week, formerly of Lafroig and now production director of Lochleigh from Ayrshire, where you're from, Dougal.
As did, yeah. I'm a Girvan boy, so if anyone's into the grain whiskies, I'm Girvan originally, but myself and John. Good, keep those connections going, Kat. It's good. I like it.
Just trading on of trade. But yeah, we've got John on next.
Everyone, I think. But I met John on Isla 2019. We did a tour of Lefroy with John, and such a nice guy.
It's great.
Bit of a whiskey legend in his own right as well. So I'm looking forward to.
Very much whiskey celebrity.
Yeah, and doing a great job at Lockleigh. They're producing some fantastic stuff. So
so we've got him
stuff.
next.
Yeah. So guys, if you like Lefroy, if you like Lockleigh, if you like whiskey in general, join us again next week, and we will be blethering with the celebrity that is John Campbell. Excellent. Guys, thank you very much. One more quick shout out for any questions if anyone does have before we say cheerio, and if not, we will say Slanjava. Cheers very much, Dougal. Not Douglas.
Cheers, guys.
And hopefully catch up maybe at a festival or sometime.
Yeah, if anyone ever spots me, come say hello, and
head up and see us as well. Come up to the shop and say hello.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, there's always good for a tasting night or something like that. So
yeah, definitely, we'll get you up.
Perfect. Cheers, guys. Have a great weekend, and we will see you all next week, if not before.